Hello everyone and welcome back to Kobean history. In today's video of medieval professions, we will be having a look at the seaweed harvester or the seaweed collector, which when you first hear it might sound a little boring and self-explanatory. But in this video we will also go over all the different uses that seaweed had throughout the ages, because it was useful for quite a lot of things. So yeah, a seaweed harvester or seaweed collector, as you might have thought, is a person who harvests or collects seaweed for a living, or at least as a large enough part of their living to be considered a job. Historically, seaweed had mostly been used as a food source, but throughout the ages it has had many other uses as well, such as in herbalism, or as a fertilizer in agriculture, and in some places seaweed was even used as a roofing material. And later on in the more modern ages it could also be used for extracting their natural polymers, which have a diverse range of applications, including in science, the manufacture of cosmetics, and even paper making. Agar-agar is one of the substances that can be extracted from seaweed. It's most commonly used in the petri dishes, as you saw a few slides earlier on screen, that is used for like bacterial cultures. But we can also eat it. If we have a look at this candy, this is a Japanese candy, by the way, if it wants to focus. We can see it's over there. Agar, it's kind of spread out, it's agar-agar. It is a substance that's also used in Japanese sweets, like traditional Japanese sweets. There is evidence for seaweed use at Skara Brae, a Neolithic settlement in Scotland from around 3000 BC. Seaweed was gathered from the coast around the island and used as a source of fuel for fires, as there were no trees on the island from which they could gather firewood. Both Romans and the Greeks used seaweed for medicinal purposes. They and other Mediterranean civilizations as well recognized the potential of certain kinds of red algae to treat some parasitic worm infections, making it an invaluable resource for millions of people who suffered from this kind of infection. The Greeks are also known to have fed livestock with seaweed as early as 100 BC. And seaweed was also already known to help in the process of dyeing fabrics, where it can be used as a mordant, which is a kind of substance that helps the dye bind to the fabrics. During the Middle Ages, the seaweed collector was an important job in some coastal communities, especially in those with a notable lack of usable land for agriculture. In these areas, seaweed and fish may have been the majority of the population's diet, and it could also be used as a fertilizer for the farmland that they had. In Ireland, for example, seaweed was collected in abundance from the 13th century and onwards in order to improve the food production by helping the crops grow that little bit faster. Even today there is still a large seaweed fertilizer industry in Ireland and Scotland that helps farmers get the most out of their land. Nowadays the harvesters mostly cultivate a deep water seaweed farm, but traditionally they would have just foraged along the shore collecting seaweeds growing within the tidal range. Archaeologists on South Galway Bay have uncovered a tidal complex which includes a late medieval seaweed farm. Long parallel banks of stone were placed on the foreshores, with each parallel bank being separated by cart tracks, and the cultivated seaweed crop being grown in the beds between those tracks. More of these kinds of complexes have been found in Ireland as well, indicating that Ireland might have been as advanced in seaweed cultivation as countries like Japan or China are. On this island in Denmark, they found a particular use for seaweed. The seaweed known as eelgrass was collected and used as a roofing material similarly to thatch. In the Middle Ages, this island was a center of salt producing, which used up a lot of fuels to keep the salt pans going. Eventually they used up too much of the wood on the island and there was a serious decline of trees, and thus the salt industry left the island. This also had consequences for the people who still lived on the island though, and because of the lack of wood, they started using driftwood to build their houses. And there was such an abundance of seaweed that they just used it to thatch their houses as well. These are a few of the reasons why we still see these houses today, some of which date back to the 1600s. And the reason they haven't decayed yet is because of that driftwood and the seaweed thatch, because they both contain a high amount of salts, which makes them more resistant to weathering. During the modern ages, substances such as crude soda, which was used in the glass and soap industries, could be extracted from seaweed. This use of seaweed reached its peak during the American War for Independence, but afterwards it declined as more efficient sources for soda became available. But during the Napoleonic Wars, a new discovery boosted the seaweed trade up again, as it proved to be a good source of potassium, which they then could use to create saltpeter, which in turn is used to create gunpowder. And it was in one of these factories where they produced saltpeter in France in 1811, where they discovered there was a whole new element present in seaweed. While making saltpeter, Bernard Courtois made the mistake of adding too much sulfuric acid to the seaweed ashes, which resulted in the production of a violet-colored gas. He passed it on to various French chemists to study, and it was then they realized that they had discovered a whole new element on the periodic table. This benefited the industry for a while. But when iodine was discovered in sodium iodide deposits in northern Chile, the seaweed industry declined once again. Thank you for watching this video on the medieval seaweed collector and the seaweed use throughout history. If you'd like to see some more medieval professions, you can find the playlist on screen right now, or you can also check out my channel to find a wider variety of historical topics.